What is up, guys? So today we have a collab video between myself and Abel. A lot of you guys know Abel. A lot of you might have been first subscribed to his channel. A lot of people who were first subscribed here might have gone over to his channel. We have some similar content. We've done a lot of podcasts together. And so we thought it would be cool to not do a podcast together today, but to have a collaboration video where we go over the most common bulking mistakes. So if you like this format, if you like the collab idea, please go ahead and like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. It really helps. So the first one that I'm going to be talking about is not measuring body composition. So when we talk about body composition in this context, we are talking about your body fat percentage for the most part. Now, a lot of you know about different ways to do this. There is DEXA, there's underwater weighing, there is skin calipers. There are different formulas out there for using measurements like your neck and your waistline and things like that to get an idea. Now, I don't think it's super critical that you get something like a DEXA scan done, which is not accessible to everybody and can be very expensive. I've only had one done myself. Since I was 14 though and started lifting, I have been tracking with waistline and calipers. And I think that's really important. I think you can get too obsessive, but one of the problems is some people will just go by pictures or how they're looking. And first of all, your mind will play a lot of tricks on you, okay? So you see yourself, you think you're fat one day, you think you're really looking good the other day, you're looking at pictures that are in different lighting, you might have a pump at different times. It's very hard to be objective with that sort of thing. Pictures are important, but for the most part, when you're bulking up, you're only going to look worse and worse in pictures. You might be in person looking bigger, looking better in clothes, looking more filled out and getting compliments, but your pictures are generally just going to look worse the fatter you get, and the fat gain is going to happen when you bulk up, at least in an acute period of time. Obviously, over years and years, they're going to look better, but in a short period, let's say you do 12 weeks bulking, even 12 months bulking, the softer you get, the worse those pictures are probably going to look. Now, my preference is a combination of waistline and calipers. Waistline I will take in the morning before I've eaten anything, same place, around the belly button, and it's not something I would recommend every day, sometimes not even every week. I think weekly is a good general guideline. But it's not that you have to do it that frequently. It just gives you an idea. Keep in mind that this is going to fluctuate a lot depending on food bulk, how late you ate the day before. Okay, so if you had a big meal the day before and then you wake up at 6 a.m., you could have a significantly different waistline than if you didn't eat that much the day before and then you woke up at 9 a.m. and did this weigh-in. Okay, so again, this is just one way to get an idea, but there's not going to be any single practice that is best and gives you a perfectly accurate representation. The calipers are less likely to fluctuate based on what you've eaten the day before. Food bulk is not really going to be a factor there, but water weight still can be a factor. Even though you are squeezing that area, there can be an influence from water weight there. So you look at these over time and you can see, okay, I bulked up 10 pounds. My waistline's only gone up half an inch. My calipers have only gone up a couple millimeters. That's probably good. That means you put on significant muscle. Obviously, you're going to want to look at strength and everything too, but these are good ways to monitor your body composition over time. Lastly, I would just note with the calipers, I am less focused on the specific percentage it tells you and more focused on the consistency of that, okay? So it doesn't matter if it tells you 12% and you're really 14%. This is just to get a gauge of your progress, okay? And so if it says 12% and you put on 10 pounds and now it's 13%, awesome. If it said 12% and you put on 10 pounds and now it says 18%, maybe not so awesome.
All right, so the last thing that I wanted to address on the theme of mistakes that people make during gaining phases, and this one is more so a philosophical problem. Nevertheless, I think it's important to address it because it could lead to needless amounts of overthinking or just wonky things that people do in the gym and outside of the gym. And the concept here that I'm talking about is thinking that there is some sort of magical power to your calorie surplus. So how does this problem present itself? Well, there are two ways that I commonly see. One is just way overthinking, exactly calculating the amount of calorie surplus that you need, and being super anal about determining what your ideal calorie surplus is. So like I mentioned in the beginning, for a beginner lifter, say 300 calories worth of surplus is pretty good for a bulking phase. For an intermediate, something like 150 to 200, and for an advanced lifter, it might only be 100 calorie surplus. Now, when people hear that, they will go crazy lengths at trying to determine whether they are a beginner, so should they go for the 300 calorie surplus, or they are already intermediate, they should go for that 150 calorie surplus, and they will spend half an afternoon trying to find the answer. And even if they find the answer to that, which hint, probably you can't objectively, then the next step is trying to find the exact number of absolute calories that you should be eating. And I can tell you from experience, back in the day, I would waste half a weekend looking through all kinds of calorie calculators and trying to estimate my exact calorie needs. And I would find the most fancy calculators at times, which not only factored in my activity levels and body size, but also the type of diet that I was eating. So if I'm eating a higher protein diet, then maybe there will be some inefficiency, so I can get by on higher calories. Now I can think back at this and think that it was a complete gigantic waste of time. Because the thing that you should know about calorie calculators is that basically all of them are correct as a ballpark, but basically none of them are perfect for you. Because everybody's body is a little bit different, everybody has different needs, and you cannot exactly predict how an individual person will respond to gaining or cutting, how their energy intake will change if you start overfeeding them or underfeeding them. That is something that you will have to figure out for yourself. So as you go into a gaining phase, probably your energy expenditure will increase for a number of reasons. You will sleep better, so you will have better energy levels, you will perform better, higher quality work in the gym, and due to increased NEAT levels and other things, there will be an upregulation in your energy expenditure. So you will have to kind of figure out your ideal energy intake by trial and error. So I would say that the most efficient, foolproof, and accurate way to determine your calorie needs is to start eating an amount of calories that you determine based on a rough estimate. And if you find that your performance increases in the gym, your body weight is starting to trend up slowly, gradually, and you're not putting on tons of fat, you're eating the right amount of calories. On the other hand, if you find that you're putting on tons of body weight and your body fat percentage is going up super, super fast, you can track that in a number of ways, which Dave addressed in his own part, then you're probably eating too much. Or if your body weight is not going up whatsoever, maybe you're even getting leaner, you need to increase your calories. So don't overthink this. Start out with a decent estimate and see how your body responds. Now, the other thing that I want to address on this theme of thinking that there is some sort of magic to your calorie surplus is people often don't understand that the fundamental thing that is going to make a massing phase or bulking phase effective is your training. The stimulus for putting on muscle mass is your training. It's not the perfect diet, the perfect calorie surplus, the high carb, low fat massing, or the low carb, high fat massing, or the super high protein diet. It is first and foremost an effective, intelligently set up training protocol. So I will hear from people who will say things like, you know what, I don't get it. I went through this really methodical massing phase and I was eating high carbs and my body weight went from this to this and I still didn't put on that much size. And my first question is, well, how was your training? How much strength did you gain in the gym? How did you perform? Before you can answer those things, it's worthless to think about how your diet went and how much body weight you gained. Training is the thing that drives muscle growth. It's kind of the opposite of cutting, where the champion of all of this, the number one thing that is driving the process is the calorie deficit. Here, the thing that is driving the process is your training. There is this saying out there that you cannot out-train or out-exercise a bad diet. Well, in the case of trying to build muscle, you sort of can. However, you can definitely not out-eat a bad training protocol if you want to gain muscle. So just realize this before you go crazy with trying to determine the optimal macro setup, macro combination, high carb, low fat, or low carb, high fat, super high protein, all of these things. First of all, fix your training protocol. If I had to bet on two people, one of them with a shitty training program but an amazing diet, or someone with a really effective training protocol but a shitty diet, I wouldn't have to think twice on who I would be betting on.
And my last point is focusing on small details that really don't matter at the detriment of other more important points. And that last part is a big caveat, because the reality is some of us are pretty obsessed with this whole game here, right? We really like lifting, we really like the nutrition, the science behind it. If you look at me, after 15 years, how much progress am I really gonna make? Not that much, but I still read about bodybuilding, I still read about lifting and the science of nutrition all the time because I find it fascinating. So maybe I want to play around with these small little details, but I know that they're small little details and they're not really going to affect my results on a whole. You know, I might make a small change here, and because everything else is consistent, I can tell that a small change resulted. But as I said, this is not to the detriment of those big goals, those big points that we need to always make sure are covered. Consistency, proper programming, good nutrition, enough protein in my diet, enough calories, these things that we know really matter. Because if you're thinking to yourself, man, do I want to do 4 sets or 5 sets? And man, do I want to have 200 grams of protein and 150 grams of carbs, or 220 grams of protein and 130 grams of carbs? What about my fat ratios? That is not going to matter if you don't have those other big points covered. And you do see that, right? You do see, not to stereotype high school students, but you definitely see it with the younger crowd where they're so focused on this supplement. What supplement can I buy? And it's like, dude, do you even know what routine you follow, or do you just go in there and lift with your bros? People will ask these questions, and, ask all the questions you want. That's great. Learn as much as you can. But if you're focusing on, how many grams of creatine that you should be taking, and you don't even know what your next workout's going to be, or how you're going to get stronger, or what you lifted last time, that's a problem. I love when people reach out to me on Instagram. I love helping people. I've actually had so many inquiries recently about my coaching that I might actually have to cut back a little bit. But I appreciate people reaching out and me being able to help as many people as possible. But at times I do get questions where people are really fretting about these details that don't matter. Now, the great thing about coaching, obviously, is that I can handle those small details for them, so they don't have to worry about that. But on the whole, I just see a lot of people stressing out. And if you're stressed out constantly, first of all, you're not going to enjoy it as much. But secondly, the stress response is a real thing, and you are only going to be able to recover from so much stress in your life. I really have seen it where people are stressing out about so many of these details. And if you can just relax, know that your plan is going to work because you put in the right principles, and just let that take care of itself, you don't have to worry about these small details. Again, if you're like me, if you're like Abel, if you're like Eric Helms and those guys, you might love those little details. I do. I love talking about them. And that's when I really like those conversations on Instagram or under the YouTube comments, anything like that. I can really appreciate that. But do it because you enjoy it, not because you think it's necessary for progress. So those are all my points. I hope you enjoyed mine. I hope you enjoyed Abel's. And let us know what you thought about this type of video. Abel and I obviously have a lot of similar ideas, and so it's great to work together. If you did like this, make sure you thumbs up the video. Go to the other channel, thumbs up that one. We really appreciate it, and we will see you next time.